They say 2% inflation is healthy. For who? If you have ever sat through a news broadcast or read a report from a central bank, you have heard this number repeated like a sacred mantra. 2%. It is presented as the sweet spot of modern economics, the golden ratio that keeps the wheels of industry turning without the engine overheating. It sounds scientific, almost boring, and entirely harmless. But today on Finance Through Time, we are peeling back the gilded wallpaper of the global financial system to reveal a much darker reality. That healthy 2% isn't a sign of stability. It is a calculated slow-motion theft of your most precious resource, your time. It is the quietest transfer of wealth in human history, one that repeats every generation until the people at the bottom have nothing left to give. To understand the genius of this deception, you first have to understand what inflation actually is. For centuries, the definition was simple. Inflation meant increasing the supply of money. If a king clipped his coins or a government printed too many notes, the value of each unit dropped. It was an act of the state. But in the 20th century, the definition was cleverly shifted. Now, they tell you inflation is rising consumer prices. By changing the language, they shifted the blame. They want you to believe that the price of eggs, rent, and gasoline is rising because of greedy corporations, broken supply chains, or mysterious market forces. But these are just the symptoms. The disease is the expansion of the money supply by the very institutions that claim to be protecting you. Why 2%? Why not 0? In a truly fair and stable economy, your dollar would buy the same amount of bread today as it did 20 years ago. But central bankers and policymakers terrified of zero inflation. They claim it leads to hoarding cash and slows down growth. But here's the truth they won't say out loud. The system is built on a mountain of debt, and debt requires inflation to survive. The global economy is a giant $315 trillion pyramid of obligations. Without a steady erosion of the currency's value, that mountain would become too heavy to carry. Inflation makes the real value of debt melt away over time. If you are the world's biggest borrower, which is always the government, you need the currency to lose value so you can pay back your massive loans with cheaper money in the future. Now, let's look at the math of your life through this healthy lens. 2% sounds small, but inflation is not linear, it is cumulative. It compounds against you. At a steady rate of 2% per year, the purchasing power of your money is cut exactly in half in just about 35 years. That is roughly the length of a standard working career. Think about what that means. The system is designed to ensure that by the time you reach retirement, the fruit of your labor from your first day on the job has lost 50% of its nutritional value. You are working inside a machine that is programmed to take half of your life's work without ever sending you a tax bill. It is the boiling frog of finance. If the heat rose by 10% in a single day, you would jump out and demand a revolution. But at 2%, you simply stay in the pot until you are cooked. History shows us that this trick is the favorite tool of failing empires. In the 3rd century, the Roman Empire was stretched to its breaking point. To fund his endless wars and a bloated bureaucracy, Emperor Nero began the process of debasement. He took the silver denarius and replaced 10% of its metal with copper. The coins looked the same. They had the same weight, but the value was a lie. Over the next 2 centuries, successive emperors followed the same healthy logic. By the time of the Great Collapse, the denarius was less than 1% silver. It was a disk of bronze with a thin silver wash that wore off in a week. The state spent the new money first while it still had prestige, but by the time it reached the Roman citizen, prices had exploded. The citizen didn't understand the chemistry of the coin. They only knew that a loaf of bread now cost a wheelbarrow of bronze. This pattern was institutionalized on August 15, 1971, when the world entered the era of pure fiat currency. When President Richard Nixon severed the dollar's link to gold, he ended the age of scarcity and began the age of policy. Money was no longer a measure of value. It became an instrument of government desire. Since that night, there has been no physical limit to how many units can be created. The 2% target became the new anchor, but it is an anchor made of sand. It is a permission slip for central banks to expand the money supply at a rate that is just fast enough to dilute your savings, but just slow enough that you don't notice the theft. It turns thrift, once a virtue, into a liability. If you're a saver, healthy inflation is your predator. If you're a borrower at the top of the pyramid, it is your business partner. The healthy 2% is the quietest tax on the unaware. It rearranges who owns the future while you're busy checking the price of milk. It rewards those who hold hard assets, land, stocks, and debt, while punishing those who trade their time for a fixed salary. You are being told that the system is stable because the numbers on your screen stay the same, but the reality behind the screen is evaporating. The system doesn't want you to be financially free. It wants you to be in motion, running faster, and faster on a treadmill that is being pulled backward by a 2% current. If the 2% target is the lie, then the Cantillon effect is the proof of the crime. We have been trained to believe that money is like a liquid that fills a container evenly, raising all levels at once. But in the real world, money is a fountain, and the people standing at the very top get to drink the water while it is still clean and cool. By the time the ripples reach you at the bottom, the water is warm, murky, and diluted. This is the secret mechanism of the modern alchemists. When a central bank like the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank decides to inject liquidity into the system, they do not distribute it through the mail to every citizen. They conjure it into existence through digital keystrokes and hand it to a select group of primary dealers, the megabanks and elite investment firms that sit at the table of power. These first ones receive the new money while prices are still anchored to yesterday's reality. They use this fresh capital to buy up assets, stocks, and real estate, pushing the value of their own holdings higher before the rest of the world even feels the first hint of a price hike. By the time that new money finally trickles down to your paycheck or to your small business, the damage is already done. The price of the home you wanted to buy has already jumped. The cost of the stocks you wanted to invest in has already soared. You are paying tomorrow's inflated prices with currency that has already lost its magic. This is why the healthy 2% is a masterpiece of social engineering. It ensures that those closest to the printing press capture the world's resources at a discount while you're left to pay the retail price for survival. The system survives only if you stay on the treadmill. Governments across the globe are currently practicing what we call financial repression. This is the quiet art of keeping interest rates artificially low, often far below the real rate of inflation. If the bank offers you 1% interest, while the cost of living is rising by 5%, you are not saving. You are losing 4% of your life's work every single year. This is a silent, regressive tax that moves wealth from the private saver to the public borrower. The government, burdened by record-high debts, needs your money to lose value so their obligations become easier to manage. They are effectively confiscating your time to balance a ledger they broke decades ago. And now, the alchemists are preparing their final evolution. Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, do not be fooled by the promise of convenience. Today, your money is a claim on a bank. Tomorrow, it will be a programmable permission issued directly by the state. In a world of digital currency, the healthy 2% can be enforced with a line of code. Imagine money that has an expiration date, forcing you to spend it rather than save it. Imagine an account that can be restricted if your spending habits do not align with the narrative of the day. The silent tax of inflation will no longer be an invisible force of the market. It will be an automated feature of your digital cage. When money becomes programmable, the redistribution of your sovereignty becomes absolute. History provides a cold but consistent warning for those who choose to ignore the theft. From the debased silver of Rome to the paper illusions of the French Revolution, the pattern is relentless. Empires do not fall when they run out of soldiers. They fall when they run out of truth. When a society can no longer distinguish between price and value, and when the currency becomes a weapon of the state against its own people, the social contract begins to shred. We are currently living inside the largest financial experiment in human history. Standing on a mountain of $315 trillion in debt that is being held together by the hope that you will never stop running on the treadmill. So, how do you exit the trap? The answer is to stop measuring your success by the numbers they control. Real wealth is not found in digits on a screen that can be devalued by a central bank decree. Real wealth is found in the original Bitcoin, which is land, the finite stage upon which all life performs. It is found in gold, which has outlived every paper empire and every healthy inflation target in human history. Most importantly, it is found in your internal resilience and your ability to solve problems the world will always have. The state can print currency, but it cannot print skill. It can dilute your savings, but it cannot devalue your character. The first ones win because they control the story of money, and they have convinced you to be a character in their script. But on Finance Through Time, we are showing you the ink. Once you understand that inflation is not an accident but a strategy, you gain the power to stand outside the current. The wave of diluted money will keep coming, crashing over those who are unprepared. The only question is whether you will be under the water or standing on the shore, holding assets that are unprintable and unclonable. In the next video, we go one layer deeper. We will dismantle the most protected illusion of all. Money isn't a store of value. It's a control tool. History has answers. I merely show you where to look. And if this deep financial journey has given you a new perspective, like the video and subscribe, because the real story begins the moment you recognize the system you are living inside.